Hi, and welcome to 2023. If you're listening for this as it's being released, we are so excited to transition from an episode every other Wednesday to every week going into the new year. So we survived our first year of podcasting together, and I hope you enjoyed all the episodes. We'd love to hear from you what your favorite episode of 2022 was. And today we're going to start a top 2 of 2022 countdown. And my second favorite episode of the year was speaking with Andrew Pudewa. He is so dynamic and so fun. And it was really great to not just talk about how he got into teaching writing and his life story, but also talking about weight loss and things that didn't have any sort of relationship to education. And Andrew's just a good friend and a fun guy, and we just got to know him so much better through that podcast. So if you haven't listened to it, or you have already, of course, the classical method is to listen to things multiple times. So here it is, number 2, Andrew Pudewa.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Andrew Pudewa is the founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing and a longtime friend of ours here at Classical Conversations. His curriculum has influenced the lives of countless people, including my own, and we are excited to talk to him today about his work and the significance of literacy in America. Andrew, welcome.
Good to be with you, Robert.
Andrew, for those who might be unfamiliar with you, just give us a little background on yourself and your work.
Sure. Yeah, I have 7 grown children, all of whom were homeschooled, more or less. We have lived in Idaho, California, and currently we live in eastern Oklahoma in the Tulsa area. I am up to 15 grandchildren now.
That's awesome.
And so I will tell you, that's the best thing about getting old is grandchildren. We have our little company, Institute for Excellence in Writing. I founded it in 1995, and it was kind of just a side gig to do a few seminars here and there to help me afford to be a violin teacher. But by 99, it was going pretty well. And when we moved to California, I quit teaching music and went full-time into IEW. And it's hard to believe it's been 22 years since then. And we've had a good long run, and things just keep getting better. And of course, our partnership with Classical Conversations has been a super and huge blessing for me personally, for our business, and for so many kids I meet all over the place. I will tell you, Robert, whenever I'm at a homeschool convention, which I was just last week, and whenever I get like 3 or 4 moms who walk up to me in a group and they're all just smiling and happy, it's a 98% chance it's a CC community group of moms. And so it's just been wonderful there. So I don't know what else there is about me. All of my children who have children are homeschooling. One of them was part of a CC community in Pennsylvania. So we're starting to see on my side now the second generation, as you are in your family.
Yeah, it's awesome, and so just being homeschooled doesn't mean I know all the tricks of the trade of being a homeschool parent, but it's cool to see the other side. What really lit the proverbial literacy fire in you in those early years? And have you always been passionate about writing? I heard you've been passionate about music as well.
Yeah, I think what really happened, I was trained as a violin teacher. I've studied with Dr. Suzuki of the Suzuki method in Japan, lived there for 3 years and came back, and I'm teaching Suzuki violin and kinder music and a few other things to try to make ends meet. And I also was associated with a small school in Montana, and this whole faculty of this school decided to go to Canada and take this course called the Blended Sound Site Program of Learning. So we're like, okay, never been there. Let's go and find out. And that's where I met Dr. Webster. I learned the structure and style approach to teaching writing. And it wasn't just a couple days into that. I just thought, wow, this is a Suzuki method approach to teaching English composition.
Mm.
I can do this. This is concrete. I understand the principles. And I had never really liked writing, especially creative writing as a kid, because I never really knew what to write. And so I kind of had that blank brain, blank paper, tears dripping on the paper kind of frustration. And when I saw Dr. Webster's method of starting with source text and checklists and doing the kind of the same thing again and again till it was easy and there's a level of mastery, I thought, wow, this is exactly what I would like to do if I were going to teach writing. And I happened to be working for the school and they needed someone to teach 7th and 8th grade English. So that was one of my many part-time gigs in addition to the music. And it just worked so well. It surprised me, surprised the kids, surprised the parents. It was just almost unbelievably good. And so the next summer I went up and took that same 12-day teacher training course in Canada again. And then the third year I went up, they said, well, if you're going to keep coming back up here, you should probably just join our staff and help us do this. So that began my association. So I don't think I came into it with this passion for helping people write better so much as I was thinking, this is just a super good methodology and I can teach this. And then the side effect was I started to write better and everyone else started to write better. And now it's, of course, proof in the pudding.
Yeah, of course, it makes my engineering heart flutter with joy to hear checklists and the process. I know, I was homeschooled by 2 engineers and not necessarily the best writing, but I did actually get to enjoy writing, and classical conversations, taking challenge helped me. But it wasn't until I was 26 years old and sat into essentials class for the first time and got to really see the IEW method. And I was like, man, I learned more, going back in as at 26 years old, sitting with a bunch of 5th graders than I did in any of my college English classes.
And that's probably the most common thing I get from parents who do our teacher training course, or they start their kids in essentials and they do 2 or 3 years and then they meet me. The most common statement I get is, I wish I had had this when I was in high school or college. It would have made my life so much better.
Yeah. Yes. I'm still working on my writing, but and we have a great team of editors here, so they make me look good, but I've noticeably improved prior to being able to sit down and take that course. What effect do you see on our country, this poor writing ability, this ability that seems to be lacking in our culture today? Like, what effects do you see that having on the United States and our freedom?
Well, I mean, there's so many ways to think about that. You could think about the kind of ridiculous things that people write and get published, and you see things getting posted here and there. But there's also, I would say, a subculture of really skilled kind of alternative writers and journalists, most of whom have got kicked off main platforms or resigned from the New York Times. Now they're on Substack. Mm-hmm. So there is very good writing. And I guess my concern is in the schools. And when we look at, for instance, a statistic I heard the other day on a podcast was over 70% of the school children in Maryland state are below proficient in both math and English language arts.
And I think that's probably across the United States.
Yeah, and I don't know that Maryland is special. Obviously, a majority are probably in the Baltimore school district, and it has problems like any large school district. But I fear that, as you listen to what's going on in so many of the schools, this emphasis on basic skills is just fading so quickly. And then with kids doing distance learning and schools shut down and the 2-year loss there, I guess my biggest concern is what happens when all these kids who are 10, 11, 12, 14 years old, they really don't read and understand what they read the way kids that age did even 20 years ago, let alone, 50 years ago.
Mhm.
What is that going to mean for our whole society when they're grown up in their 20s and 30s? Are we going to have to import literate people and import talent to keep our infrastructure running? And yet, those people are, they're going to be getting so much of their information about life from their Twitter feeds and Instagram memes. How are we going to survive this?
Well, I remember, I remember studying Egyptian hieroglyphics a little bit, growing up. Of course, those are all image based. So maybe we'll go back to that just through memes, right? We'll just communicate solely from movie memes.
That would be a tragedy. But one of the things that gives me a lot of hope is to see so many parents who are really excited about, let's read the good and great books with our kids together, and let's pursue a plan of developing really good basic skills upon which a better education can be built. And of course, that's CC in a nutshell, is the recovery, if you will, of, I wouldn't even say classical education, almost like the recovery of real education.
Mm-hmm.
And then, other people who are not yet part of the CC world, they're seeing a need. There's definitely a concern. Of course, statistics show that a whole lot of those parents who became accidental homeschoolers or COVID schoolers or unintentional homeschool, whatever you want to call it, a lot of them are continuing on now because they have had a window into seeing better what the schools are doing or failing to do, and that it's not impossible to accomplish a lot with your own kids at home in a relatively reasonable amount of time.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who is feeling overwhelmed by the idea of learning or teaching to write with excellence? Because we haven't necessarily grown up in a system that's that way.
Yeah, well, it's never too late to learn something. I think your mom always kind of inspires me. She's always like got some new project or idea or thing. A lot of my friends, we keep very active. I learned just by teaching, right? So I started teaching Latin. I didn't know anything, and I thought this would be really good. So I got a bunch of kids and added them to my youngest kids and started a little class, and I didn't know what I was doing. But after 6 years, I look back and think, wow, I learned so much about grammar and language and structure and vocabulary and history and Western culture and all these things that as an adult were just not really on my screen in terms of Latin. And I'm so grateful I did. So, writing is the same way. And, I think any parent who starts teaching their children starts to learn all those things that they either were kind of fuzzy on or learned it and forgot it or never heard about it. And of course, there's that kind of best kept secret. One of the real reasons we homeschool is so we can get the education we never got.
That's so true. And just staying a few days ahead of your students, or even, modeling humility and saying, hey, I don't know this either, but let's learn how to look it up together, and teaching the kids really the skills of learning, which are so important. And one of the reasons that we have this podcast, we hear success stories from people that use your program all the time. What are some ones that really stand out to you, or things that you hear that you never thought you would hear about those who've embraced IEW?
Yeah, I wish I could go, read you 20 examples here, but to summarize in the interest of time, I think there's probably two categories of what people tell me that I find most delightful. One is when they say, my kid couldn't string two sentences together. He hated writing. He cried every time we tried to do it. It was so awful. I almost quit homeschooling because of writing. And then we found your program. We got into essentials or something. And 3 years later, it's his favorite thing to do. And so that kind of attitude transformation, and I understand exactly how the kid got there and how it changed, but it's always nice to just let a mom kind of tell the story. And sometimes, little tears will form on the edge of her eyes. I'm going to cry, it's so important. So that would be one category. And then the other one is I really wasn't sure that this homeschooling thing was going to prepare my kid for, college or real world, real life. And then, he went off and maybe as a dual enrollment thing, took an English class at a community college, or went off to school and took English classes or had to write papers. And he was almost surprised, or she, it could be a girl, that he got an A. And then the professor said, wow, this is really good. I don't meet a lot of kids who write this well. Where'd you learn to do it? My mom taught me. So this, and I'm sure you get stories of this all the time. Kids who go off to a college and just, if they can read decently well and write grammatically correctly with logic, they perform very, very well, usually at the top of the class. And sometimes that's a pleasant surprise to the parents who were still kind of nervous about, did we do everything right in the homeschool so this would happen? And so that kind of fulfillment of the years of working hard and the little doubts in the corner of the mind,
Hey, I want to interrupt this broadcast to tell you about American Heritage Girls. If you're looking for an opportunity for your daughter to grow in her character and leadership skills, consider joining American Heritage Girls today. American Heritage Girls is a Christ-centered program for girls 5 to 18 years of age with troops in all 50 states and in 15 countries. American Heritage Girls volunteer troop leaders help girls to grow in their faith, cultivate a heart of service, enjoy the great outdoors, have fun in the community with one another, and build leadership skills that will last a lifetime. Ultimately, American Heritage Girls encourages them to become confident, competent, Christ-honoring women of integrity. And you can learn more at homeschool.americanheritagegirls.org. That's homeschool.americanheritagegirls.org for more information. Now back to our podcast. Yeah, I think college professors are like the evil nemesis of homeschool parents. Like, what is the college professor going to think of my kids that I just spent all this time and effort? And of course, we hear great stories. One of my favorite stories is a student that had, taken IAW in our Essentials program and had gone through Challenge. And she was in her English course as a freshman at college. And professor was just disgusted by all the papers. And he said, hey, I need all the students to come talk about your papers. And of course, she was the first one to sign up, and she walks through the door and the professor's like, why are you here? She goes, well, you told us, you wanted to talk to us about our papers. And he's like, not yours. Yours was great. Actually, he's like, well, actually, while you're here, if I just give you an A in this class, will you TA and help me grade these papers, help your students get caught up? So, I mean, not that all the students are that way, but it's just the parents do an amazing job. And when you have a system that works so well, I mean, it's just amazing. And when you pair those things together, but it's a new way of thinking and learning. And, I think parents who stick with it, see those blessings and see the fruit of their work.
And I met a number of college professors who also are homeschooling their kids.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm just going to steal this and put it right in and teach my sociology students or my history students or whatever how to do this, because it would improve my life so much by doing so. So that's kind of fun too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things that's a little bit different about your program than maybe modern education, there's people are like, how do you feel about this? But one of the things that you actually do is remove that responsibility from the children of having an inspiration of what to write, and you give them examples. So why did you think of that, and why is that such a powerful way to teach writing?
Well, it's kind of part of when I first saw Webster's system, I thought, this is like teaching music. So when we teach music, and I've used this analogy before, but we don't say to a kid, okay, come on in here, sit down at the piano. I'll teach you how to sit and how to push the keys, and I'll even teach you the names of the notes. But, there is one little rule here. You can't play anything that anyone else ever played. You have to kind of make it all up on your own. Just express yourself with the keyboard and, practice that 20, 30 minutes a day for the next 5 years. Well, what level of musicianship would we get? So in teaching music, we kind of do the opposite. Say, okay, you learn to play the piano, violin, whatever. Play this piece. Play it this way. Imitate me precisely. And then we go to something a little more complex and something a little more complex and do that for some time. And then on the foundation of basic skills, we can talk about the creative elements of interpretation or improvisation or composition. But when we discredit the importance of imitation in teaching a skill, we will see poor teaching of that skill. So when I saw the use of, source texts, and so here's a story, here's an Aesop fable, here's an article, here's some interesting information about a person or a place or an animal, and then make a little outline and retell that information. Everybody can do that. There's no, I don't know what to do. And then through our system and the 9 units, we gradually move from that dictated source text to a little less help, source text where you have to work a little harder and ask a little harder questions, moving into writing from pictures, research where there's too much information and it's not necessarily organized in advance for you, all the way up to our unit 7, which is what we call inventive, or you could call it creative, but inventive writing. And so there's that long runway from the modeling and practicing of structure and style to, okay, now what would you like to tell about? Some experience you had or some opinion or something from your imagination or memory. And so with that runway, the students do so much better. And then Unit 8 is our essays where they kind of have to combine, collect up information and tell what you think about that. Add your observations, analysis, opinion. So it's brilliantly well constructed. And, I don't take a huge amount of credit for designing the thing. I learned it from Dr. Webster in 1990, 91, 92. And I just kind of got good at teaching it. And of course, the more you do something, the more you can refine it and improve it over the years. So I find that it helps, especially the kids who are just frustrated by that blank page, but it also gives concrete techniques and tools to high aptitude kids who love writing. There's kids who, start writing their first book when they're 8.5 years old. And that's great, but they still also benefit from learning the structure and style tools.
Yeah. I mean, I think what is it? Picasso said, practice the basic skills and that way you can act like an artist. So if both ends of the spectrum can benefit from knowing these things. And of course, I always say, music and sports and cooking are like the 3 areas where the classical model of education was never lost, because to be excellent or good or even enjoy any of those things, you have to use those tools of learning. And so it makes sense that you'd go from a musician or musical to seeing how this relates in writing and being able to be the powerhouse organization supporting families across the globe that you are today.
It reminds me, the very first article I ever wrote and published was called Why Music May Save the World, which was an allusion to Pablo Casals, who said at the United Nations, music will save the world. But my argument was exactly what you just said. You can deconstruct literature study, you can deconstruct history study, you can deconstruct art, but you can't really deconstruct music because then it ceases to exist. Same thing with sports, which I know you can't just not have foundations or you don't have a sport, you don't have competition, you don't have anything. So.
Yeah. One of the things that you like and are known for is your jokes. So do you just scour the internet for these, or do you wake up in the middle of the night and write them down? What is your inspiration with your humor?
Yeah, I can't say that the jokes I have made myself are on the higher zone of good jokes that I know. But most of us, when we were kids, we like to collect stuff, right? I collected seashells and I collected stickers and Matchbox cars, and I guess I would say one of my hobbies then, as an adult, is I collect jokes, and then I look for opportunities to share jokes with people. When I record video classes, I pretty much always start with a joke. When I go out and teach live classes, and there's something about humor that kind of just breaks the ice. And if people laugh or chuckle or smile, they kind of instantly become more teachable, more interested in what's going on.
Mhm.
So I have worked to cultivate that ability to add humor to my teaching, and also try to inspire other teachers and parents to bring in some of that humor and levity. A good joke kind of rings with intelligence. It kind of
Mhm.
activates that higher part of your mind, like you had to make a connection between two things that you didn't expect were going to be connected. And so there's kind of a healthy mental, I don't know, tonic there with
Mhm.
humor, I think.
Yeah, maybe you're building up some neural pathways or something.
But yeah, I will confess, I'm always on the lookout for another good joke. Would you like to hear my newest favorite joke?
Yes, I'd love to.
So a friend of mine was out hiking and he came to the edge of a canyon.
Okay.
And so he stood at the edge of the canyon and he shouted out, "Hello!" And he heard back, "Well, that's original." You see, it was a sarcasm.
Sarcasm.
I just love that one. But that's kind of a new one, and pretty soon it'll be old, and I'll have to go find a new favorite one.
That's a good one. Yeah. And it helps with memory, right? Because you're always memorizing the joke as well.
Yeah, when I go and check in at the gym, there's always someone at the desk, and I swipe my little card, and there's about 3 girls that work there, and so I started just telling them a random joke now and then. Now they're always like, "Where's my joke?"
They're putting pressure on you. So, Andrew, as someone who's known you, you've always been a pretty fit guy, and as a dad, I've started putting on the weight. But I've noticed that you're looking trim lately. So, what has it been? Going to the gym, changing your diet? What are your weight loss secrets?
Well, it was the year 2000 was kind of good for me personally in many ways. I stopped traveling for an entire year. I didn't get on an airplane and go anywhere, and that was really weird.
2020.
Yep, 2020. And my hobby started to be cooking, because my wife, she cooks for herself, and I'm gone a lot, so I don't know. She's not cooking for me. The kids are all gone. So I started cooking, and then I started studying a little bit better on nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
The first book I listened to was called Eat to Beat Disease by William Lee, MD. And I wasn't really fighting any particular disease, but I was noticing that people my age that I'm familiar with are kind of starting to get these kind of chronic type of degenerative diseases, or older.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't want that. So, the first step was cooking much better food and then not traveling. So there's no airports, there's no hotels or restaurants, there's no junk food.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing, and this is kind of what really inspired me, is I was playing with my grandchildren one afternoon, and I just got this flash, like, I really want to see these kids grow up and be adults and have their own children. And then I thought, well, do the math. If I want to see these kids in their
Mm-hmm.
20s, I need to live to my 80s. So
Yeah.
what does that entail? So I started kind of on a super low carb, like not quite keto, but a low carb diet, eliminated all processed sugars and processed foods. And that was pretty easy to do because I was just, cooking at home. And so I could
Mm-hmm.
eat whatever I wanted to. And then I read a little bit about intermittent fasting. So I started to shrink my eating window. And so rather than eating 3 times a day with snacks, I shrank it down. And right now I pretty much eat all the food that I eat in a day within a 4 to 5 hour window. And, at first you kind of have to get used to being hungry at noon or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or whatever. But now it's just kind of a passing thing, like, oh, I'm hungry. It'll go away soon. And then I also was inspired by my son, who was a Challenge 4 student. He became a personal trainer at a gym nearby. And to try to kind of encourage him along that path, I promised that if he'd go get his certification, I would be his first paying client. So he started getting me on the resistance training. And I'll tell you, Robert, I hated it so much. I mean, the first 6-8 months going to the gym, I was just like, I hate this place. I'm always sore. The music is horrible. I hate it. But I kept my agreement. And I think after it was like 8 months, 10 months, somewhere in that zone, I got noise canceling earbuds.
Yeah.
And that helped with the bad music of the gym environment. And then just one day I was sitting in my office thinking, I'm done. I guess the thing I really want to do now is go to the gym. I'm like, who is this person? That is not a me that I've ever known. So it was kind of just a combination of all those things. But I will say I feel better. I have better energy and mental clarity, and I sleep better really than I did 20 years ago when I was 40. So, I highly recommend don't wait too long to get into the kind of thinking about preserving good health and longevity. So my goal now is to die young at an old age.
Oh, yeah, I know my mom started to do some of those things because she had some health issues, nothing too major, but things that could be bad if they left unchecked. And I know she's doing a little bit of the keto lifestyle now, and she's trimmed up too quite a bit. So, and she said the same thing. She's got a lot more energy, which is of course scary for all of us here at Classical Conversations home office.
Definitely. When your mom gets energy, it's work for everyone, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's fun. So what's the best way to keep up with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and stay connected with you for our audience members?
Well, I have a podcast. We've been doing it for almost 10 years. So there's a big backlog of episodes available. We post weekly, and it's called The Art of Language Podcast. So you can find that wherever quality podcasts are found. And then also our website, IEW.com. We've got blogs and forums, and you can get on a mailing list and find out about events, both live or online, my speaking schedule at conventions and such forth. So all that's available and easy to find, IEW.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Robert. And you guys keep up the awesome work there at CC.
We appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I know I did. Please share it with a friend who is in an educational journey, because together we can practice and master the 15 tools of learning. God bless and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.